From the Miller Business Center at Middle Country Public Library, this is Centered on Business. So we're a little late, like a week late. We're sorry. We're sorry we're late. It's all right. I mean, there's a reason why we're late. Elizabeth, what's the reason why we're late? I mean, something big happened this week, right? We all came back to work.
Oh, true. We did. It's been a big change for us. We're out of our homes and we're back at work, but it's like we're still in our homes because we're not in the same room.
No,
right, exactly.
For the time being, logistically, it made sense for this week's episode to do it remotely. But so we were talking about what we were going to talk about on the podcast yesterday, and Elizabeth said, "Let's talk about podcasts on the podcast."
And you were shocked because I've never mentioned podcasts before. I mean,
So Elizabeth, tell us, how many podcasts do you subscribe to? How many podcasts do you subscribe to? You can look.
I can't. I wouldn't be able to. You know, I listen to all my podcasts through Stitcher.
Okay.
The Stitcher app, and I like that because I can have them in different folders. Mm-hmm. So I would say I probably subscribe to 50 or 60 podcasts.
That is amazing.
Yeah, that is.
Now, how many I listen to regularly? 40. No.
Wow.
I listen to a lot regularly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So,
but now what a lot of people might not know is that you can listen to a podcast that is a series. So like any TV series or any series, it has 8 episodes and then it's done for a while and it comes back in several months. For instance, one that I love by Malcolm Gladwell, Revisionist History. Great podcast. Highly recommend it. I guess it's semi-business focused because it talks a lot about why things happen and people's mind frame when things are happening. They have one of their most popular ones is about golf courses.
Ooh, I like golf courses a lot.
It is called A Good Walk Spoiled.
I'm writing it down.
And it's fascinating because you just never knew that you wanted to listen to a 37-minute podcast about golf courses. But so he is, you know, it's a season and then it's gone and then it comes back. So I might have 40 or podcasts that I listen to all the time, but they're not always running all the time.
Concurrently, yeah. So it's just...
Yes.
Okay. Well, your idea, and I think is a great idea, is that we should mention a couple podcasts or a few podcasts that we enjoy listening to that are business related.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So Elizabeth, why don't you go first? Why don't you give us your first pick of your business podcast?
Okay, well, I'm going to start off by saying that every morning I probably listen to 4 to 6 podcasts before I even get to work, which people might think that's crazy. But again, I think people are learning more about podcasts. Very popular now. So I listen to a news podcast. First thing in the morning, I listen to a 20-minute podcast from the New York Times called The Daily. And it covers a big news story. So I would recommend that you pick whatever news source you most like, see if they have a podcast. And they probably do have something that's very short, just kind of giving you an overview. And the other news source that I like is NPR. So they have every morning NPR up first. So that one's even shorter than 20 minutes and it just goes through major news stories. So might not be technically business, but I think as a business person, as a business professional, as somebody who works with businesses, you always kind of want to know general news stuff. And really, as a good American citizen, you want to know general news of what's happening in our country. So that's part of that time that I'm listening to podcasts. But The third podcast that I listen to every morning is called Business Wars Daily. It's literally 4 minutes, and it's a timely topic related to business and what's happening in the world. So, for instance, let me open up what today's episode. Oh, today's episode was called "Oh Baby, Monitor Maker Nanit Lands $21 million investment and finds a new market." So it was about baby monitors. Nanit versus iBaby. Sounds boring. Like if I told you, hey, listen to this podcast about baby monitors, you might think, that sounds boring. But again, it was 4 minutes, and it's so well done that you realize, oh, I guess I am interested in baby monitors.
Or at least that business, the business of baby monitors.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, just for wow, I never knew that all that stuff was happening. They had one last week about Sephora pledging 15% to Black businesses, Black-owned businesses, and it turned into then what's Ulta doing. So you kind of see what two companies might be doing, which filters into the main podcast of Business Wars Daily, which is Business Wars. That one's much longer. It can be 30 minutes or a little longer. And that talks about business rivalries and feuds. And again, I mean, did you guys know there were raisin cartels?
No,
I mean,
no, absolutely not.
That Sunmade started as a collective formed by wealthy raisin growers, and they actually used violence to get other raisin farmers to join the collective. And this all happened in the 60s. Like, who knew? I want to see that movie.
I want to know who was in charge of that California Raisin song, the commercial when I was growing up.
Oh, I love the California Raisins. I had the little action figures. I used to watch. They had like a movie short that they put together. I had that. I used to watch all the time, but I digress.
And now you know it was a cartel.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. And what's nice about a lot of these is you can look at the topic and say, maybe I'm not interested. But the longer you listen to it, you realize you cannot judge it by the title, because all of a sudden you want to hear about raisin cartels and you want to know about the feud between Patagonia and North Face.
Yeah. So Business Wars was another one, was one that I was gonna talk about. I think, I don't know what made me pick it. I know, Elizabeth, you had it on your list, so I kind of wanted, it just sounded interesting, and I know it's done by Wondery, so they it's a good production value, so what you're getting. So I had listened to the Amazon versus Walmart. I only listened to I guess they probably have more, but it was like episode 7 where they talked about how COVID-19 could change the retail landscape between the two. And then just digging a little deeper, like you said, it's just crazy. They have Nintendo versus Sony, WWF versus WCW, USFL versus NFL. Those are things from my life and growing up that I'm all interested in. So it was just crazy the Walmart versus Amazon one was great, just as it is, but to know that I can go back and listen to WWF versus WCW and listen to how Vince McMahon probably or USFL versus NFL. I would recommend that podcast. I think it's good to check out for sure.
Yeah. And they just added another part to Business Wars. Sorry to interrupt, Sal. Shorter, because the Business Wars, the Amazon versus Walmart, Patagonia versus North Face, those are several parts within the podcast. But now they also have business battles. So there's one about Monopoly and how this guy tried to steal the idea from this other person. And there's one about Tetris and how it's connected to Russia. So it's very interesting. I highly recommend it.
There's 40 seasons of that podcast, so there's plenty.
Wow.
Yeah, 40 seasons. Yeah.
Oh, all these people that are just getting into podcasts now have so much content to listen to.
Exactly. What about you, Alex? What's another one that you might be that our folks might be interested in?
Well, first, I just want to start off by saying I am similar to Elizabeth with my podcast listening. I do listen to maybe one or two podcasts in the every morning, like depending on like how long it is or whatever. But they're definitely a very big part of my life, and ever since I've been introduced to them, and I subscribe to about 10. So it's not as many as Elizabeth, but so I was going to bring up Brought to You By, which I think Elizabeth again had suggested. So I'm pretty much just stealing everything that you recommended. I'm sorry. But there was a fascinating one about, so they talk about stories about biggest household name brands and how they affect our lives and culture, for better or for worse. And I listened to an interesting one about who owns the Oakland A's baseball team. And that was just fascinating. And it's not long. It was only, I don't even know how long it was, like a half hour maybe. And it was just amazing to hear about how the Oakland community was so intermingled with their sports team. And not only that, is how the Oakland as a city has been so left behind by so many sports franchises. Like the Oakland Raiders have just this last year left them to go to Las Vegas, and they've left previously to go to Los Angeles and then come back again. And there's a history of the Oakland A's baseball team wanting to move many times. So, and they gave you stories of the people that lived in Oakland and how the baseball team actually is like I know we're talking about podcasts and I'm going off on a tangent here, but the baseball team reflects the culture and the people that live in that city. And it was just very interesting. They also had The Best a Woman Can Gillette was another interesting one.
Yeah, I heard that one.
Oh, yeah. They have great ones. And they've been off since April. The new season starts on Friday, I think. And I don't know if Sal agrees. I prefer their old name.
Yes, I do prefer the whole name. Was household? Was it household name? Right.
Household name. Yeah. But they had during the between seasons, they had one on Where is Hidden Valley Ranch, and there really was a Hidden Valley Ranch, and the guy who created ranch dressing lived at Hidden Valley Ranch. Who knew you cared? I don't know.
Yeah,
I did.
That's funny.
So I got into it's interesting. I got into this podcast because of Elizabeth, because I remember it must have been like a year ago, maybe longer than that. You were listening to it, you're like, you have to listen, you have to download this episode. It's about gangs at Disneyland.
Oh yes, the Disneyland gangs.
And I'm like, what are you talking about? You're like, look, listen to that episode, listen to it. It's about gangs at Disneyland. And it was an episode about quote unquote gangs at Disneyland. It was very funny. They also have episodes.
October of
October, yeah.
Yep.
They have Kentucky Fried Christmas, which was another standout episode for me. It was about Kentucky Fried Chicken in Japan and how it's like a huge thing. It's almost as big as, Santa Claus as far as like iconography and whatnot. But my very favorite episode of that show was Dish.
Oh no.
Yeah.
No, that's a
So
good
it was
one. That's
a town called Dish and I used to have a Dish. I used to have a Dish Network dish, and it was about a town. Where was that, Elizabeth? In Texas or the Midwest or somewhere?
Yes.
That if they had changed their name to Dish, they would all get free Dish Network for 10 years or something ridiculous like that. And they did it. They changed their name to Dish.
My favorite episode of that is the Waffle House Index.
Yes, that's a good episode. Yes.
About how FEMA uses the Waffle House to determine when to deploy disaster aid.
That's right.
To natural disasters. I mean, amazing. I mean, who knew? The Waffle House Index.
Exactly. So basically, if Waffle House closes, that means it's really bad, and FEMA has to go there because they don't close for anything. So
very interesting. Yeah. Highly recommend that one.
So I just wanted to mention one that I thought would be interesting for folks who are perhaps looking at starting their own business at home, specifically like online businesses, and it's called the Smart Passive Income with Pat Flynn. And I found out about this because I got to see him speak at a conference. And I mean, the guy is doing very, very, very well for himself. And it is he does do seminars, and he does have like a learning package. So, like they're selling like these business systems. You've seen that, right? Where people go out there and they do the conference circuit and they sell these business systems. Send me $100 for this class, $300 for that. I'm going to help you build your business. So he's got business systems. So before I suggested this podcast, I did look him up to make sure that he was legit and to see what other people thought about him. And he is legit. He gets very high ratings on all those review websites that go out and check to make sure that these business systems and these education systems work. But I highly recommend it because he's got a very nice personality. His podcasts are very, very well structured, obviously, because he's in addition to selling this stuff, he's a teacher. That's what he does. He's a coach. So it's very well structured. And of course, like once we got into this COVID thing, he moved, obviously a lot of his businesses are from home, but he moved to doing your business at home with kids. How difficult could that be? And that's like one of his more recent episodes. So I highly recommend it. And he's a blogger. He started out as a blogger. So he moved to podcasting, and now he sells and he teaches how to podcast and how to build your business through podcasting. A program that we've done here at the Miller Center. Just want to mention. But it's very cool.
It's interesting that you say that, Sal, that like he didn't start off in podcasting. And the podcasts that I've mentioned are very much like people that are used to pushing news out there and doing research. But what I recommend people do if they're trying to jump into podcasts, they try maybe the ones we recommend, is find like a business author that you like. Like I read The Latte Factor by David Bach. And it was interesting. So as somebody who loves podcasts, I'm like, oh, does he have a podcast? And he does. He has a podcast related to that book. And I enjoyed his voice and the delivery was good. And he interviewed some people that I like. I didn't listen to every episode, but I listened to a few. So, I mean, if you don't know where to start, that's a way to start. Most podcast apps will let you just search random words. Even if you just want to search business, you want to search the author that you like. And a lot of podcasts are not series. So one podcast I was going to recommend is called The Dream. And it's about multi-level marketing. That's a series. So season 1 is you listen to every episode to get a full story. They cover how multi-level marketing started. Is it different from pyramid schemes? How, these big companies got laws changed so they could be legal. Fascinating. But something like Business Wars, you could jump in and just listen to a couple of episodes here and there. The podcast you mentioned, you can listen to a couple of podcasts here and there. If you miss a day, you're not missing anything big. So there's so many different ways you can consume podcasts and information. If you need any suggestions, let me know. Second season of The Dream was about the wellness industry. Fascinating.
Wow. Yeah. And I kind of feel like these podcasts are now becoming what, and dare I say this, and I might get in trouble for saying this, but like business books, we have a lot of business books, and they're all very segmented. You have business books about building wealth, business books about, managing people, business books about building your business, marketing. I feel like podcasts are slowly I don't want to say replacing, but supplementing those sections, those segments in this field, where folks are actually able to do a search on your favorite podcast software, your favorite podcast app, and find podcasts about marketing your business. Find podcasts about building wealth. It's just and thousands and thousands and thousands of podcasts, and it's instant. That's the best part of it. Instant and free right now, right? I mean, right now it's free.
It's interesting that you said that, because I'm seeing such a big change with podcasts. I've been listening for years, maybe religiously listening to podcasts, maybe three years, I would say. I've listened to them as long as This American Life has had an app and called their show a podcast. So I've been listening to This American Life since the start. But to see the change and to see now, podcasts are free. Anybody can listen to a regular podcast, but they're adding so much content. Alex mentioned that Business Wars Daily is from Wondery, so that's great. Wondery, now it's Wondery Plus. So now, you don't want to wait and only listen to Business Wars Daily once a day? Listen to 10 before everybody else. Or the app that I listen to my podcast through is the Stitcher app. I pay a fee for the whole year. And if the podcast I'm listening to is part of the Stitcher network, I don't listen to commercials. But every podcast, because they have to make money. Yes. That's how they make money.
Yeah, I also subscribe to Stitcher. I love Stitcher. It's so convenient, and just to search and just to keep like the podcast you listen to, like in like you said, like in different lists and folders, whatever. It's awesome. So not that you have to buy the subscription, but I do as well. Just because it's really put together very well.
And you can listen to this podcast on Stitcher. I just want to mention that.
Yes, you can. I have it.
Centered on business.
Yep. It's in my favorites and automatically downloads to me every time a new episode comes out.
Fantastic. And you're like, oh, what is this about? Oh, I know.
Oh, that voice. I know that voice.
Well, that's great. Well, I hope that folks liked what we had to say. And what we'll do is in our show notes, we'll list the podcasts that we spoke about today, plus a couple extra ones. How's that sound?
That sounds great. And I would like to encourage everybody maybe to go to our Facebook page and let us know what podcasts you like, because I think the three of us are always looking for interesting podcasts.
Today's episode featured Elizabeth Malafi and Alex Blend. I'm Sal DiVincenzo. Centered on Business is a production of the Miller Business Center, an initiative of the Middle Country Library Foundation. For more information, visit us on the web at millerbusinesscenter.org.